Want entertainment designed just for you? Then check out customizable streaming TV from Xfinity. It makes your life simple, easy, awesome.
Xfinity gives you customizable streaming TV options. Enjoy the most free shows anywhere on any device, and even access your streaming apps right on your TV with X1. Go to Xfinity.com, call 1-800-XFINITY, or visit a store today to learn more. Restrictions apply.
Revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution.radio. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, and our producer, a mad painter, Thomas Becker. And I do not think that our guest has shown up yet. Is that so, Thomas Becker?
No, ma'am, he isn't online. I can try calling him and see what happens anyways.
Okay, yeah, give him a call and see if he picks up.
He's usually good at it. He's a host here at the station, too, so.
Yeah, Brad Olson. I'll talk about him while you're calling him. He's the author of 9 books.
It just hung up.
Okay, so we will try to get Brad Olson on another time. Sasha, are you there?
Yeah,
Alex,
yes,
Sasha.
indeed. I am here in Maui, Hawaii. Where are you?
Yeah, I'm over in Maui, Hawaii too, and just trying to get our guest on. I'm looking to see who else is around. I've sent a couple people a message, but I guess the 3 of us.
Well, I'm around. I'll just interview me if you want.
Oh, no.
Okay, Sasha, what would you like to tell us? Sasha,
I'll interview you.
Oh, okay.
Sasha, I'll interview you, or you interview me. But we'll interview Mad Painter. But there's like a dozen people on.
Janet, okay, I'll interview you. Janet, tell me what's the most salient thing in terms of our interest in extraterrestrial contact. What's the most thing that's on the top, that's the most exciting, the hottest thing for you to talk about right now?
Well, there's a lot of things going on. the weather is amazing right now around the world, and it makes you wonder, like, what's going on. So we're over here in Hawaii, and we're facing a potential, what did they call it, a Pompeii type explosion of the volcano on the Big Island, and we are on the island of Maui, and so we're like, I don't know, how far away are we from the Big Island? Maybe 50 miles or something?
Just when 50 miles. When Pompeii went off, it didn't hurt Rome.
And how far away was Rome from Pompeii?
Oh, yeah, I don't know, 100 some miles. But, the Romans knew it was happening. All their engineers said, this is building up. The usual ducts are clogging. You've got to do something. And the authorities just didn't know what to do. And, of course, the engineer was saying, evacuate the city.
Mm-hmm.
They did.
Mm-hmm.
They did.
So they didn't evacuate Pompeii, and they even had engineers back in the day. And
they had brilliant people that knew exactly what was happening. That the guy that was supervising went around and he looked at all the different places, and he advised the authority, the administration, about what was happening. That they just did not react fast enough. They didn't understand the magnitude of the danger.
There was another city called Herculina.
Okay. And where was Herculina?
At the same time Pompeii was buried.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
The whole area was just totally, everything was changing. The magnet was flowing all over in different places than it used to flow and everything.
So, anyway, I was looking it up, and it said that Pompeii was 20 miles from the volcano, and so that was pretty close. But,
okay.
And there's somebody going, whoop, whoop. Who is talking to me? That's nothing.
How does this relate to extraterrestrial? How does this relate to the subject of extraterrestrials, Janet? Which is the question I was asking you.
I know. Well, I'll give you the correlation. I'll give you a moment. So then TJ's over there in Florida, and she says, I just heard there's a hurricane coming, and she looked and she said, it's coming my way. It's supposed to land at 1 a.m. At night or something. And so we, of course, the ET stuff is, are we targeted individuals? That's always been a question. We get that all the time from people that are in the ET field because we're researchers, and we hear stories of how they get killed and this and that. So we just went there for one moment. We went, what is this? Are we targeted individuals? Or do we just happen to be people in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is nothing going to happen? So, life is like that. A bunch of directions where our lives can go. And are we the co-creators of these realities? First of all, that's part of the ET field. What do we create? Are we able to create a reality through our minds and our souls and our participation in certain paradigms, and by our focus and intention we manifest those things? And that's what I learned from. Okay, I got a live one. I got Peter Moon, but I'm Ad, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Peter Moon, I think is, let me text him real quick. Peter Moon might come on. We haven't heard from Peter in a long time. Okay.
I have his phone number.
Okay, let me just text him real quick. Okay. I'll tell him that.
Or I got two phone numbers.
Mad Painter will.
So.
Call them both.
I don't know which one he's using, but.
Okay. Let me see what he says. Isn't this exciting? We're like fishing for gas. But it's interesting. If somebody doesn't show up, I go down, because I've had all these people on my shows over the year. And, my goodness. Okay.
Peter Moon's an awesome guest. I've had him on a couple
times.
He is.
I love
enjoy talking
Peter. To him. Okay, let's see if we get him. Okay, I'm texting him. Now you guys out there in Radio Land see the process, what we go through. Okay, he says, well, I'm on. So go ahead and call Peter Moon.
All right, I'll try this one first because it says that he's on the line.
Okay, yeah, it's got a little green.
Janet, look up your page on Peter. Read the bio of Peter.
Oh, well.
Hello.
Hi, Peter. It's Janet and Sasha and a mad painter, Thomas Becker. I think you've spoken to all three of us, and we're live on the Sacred Matrix. Yes.
I remember you all.
Oh, wonderful. How are you? Thank you for stepping up to the plate here, because our guest is no show. I'm sure it was a confusion in times or something, but it's great. I saw you were online, and I said, hi, would you like to come on? And I'm delighted to be talking to you again. What's going on in your world?
Well,
what's new?
When you called, I was in the middle of, it came as a welcome break. I'm actually editing the translation of chapter 4 of Radu Cinemar's 5th book. I don't know when I last spoke to you, but since then, Radu Cinemar has come out with a 5th book on his adventures into the inner earth. It's called Inside the Earth, the Second Tunnel.
Wow.
Now,
good.
When I last left you, we had probably gone into a deep history of Romania, if I recall properly.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new people there, so whatever you repeat won't be bad anyway. So it's called Inside the Earth. Say that again, the deep tunnel?
The second tunnel, and it's not available.
The second.
It probably won't be here till October at the soonest, but in any case, we'll start over for the new people. How much time do we have tonight?
2 hours.
We actually have 2 hours if you want to take it all, or stay here as long as you want.
Okay.
But we just started the show.
I'll start at the beginning. And I'll summarize the beginning, and I'll summarize. Okay, so basically, my name is Peter Moon, and I'm a author of predominantly about the subject of time travel. The Montauk Project Experiments in Time is my most famous work. And of course, we won't go into that tonight. It's a very interesting story. Mm-hmm. It inspired the TV show Stranger Things. And we're working on...
Oh, that was...
Yeah, Stranger Things...
That was inspired by your... I thought it was, because I only watched season 1. I got to catch up on season 2. But let's talk about that. Just a little short thing here. So...
it's repopularized.
So how did you know that?
The story, pardon me?
How did you know? Did they contact you and say they were going to use your book as...
They had to be warned, because what they did is, there's a whole crazy story surrounding it, which we don't need to get into. But basically, they're going to call the show Montauk. And I wrote to them. I wrote to them with a certified letter and a green card telling them that they had the potential to infringe on the copyrights. So what they did is they changed the name. And one could make an argument, a legal argument against them, but they haven't really stolen the story. They've taken elements of the story, they've changed the names and the places, and I don't wish to be embattled in a court battle with them. Somebody's already is taking them to court without any merit, by the way. I might have merit, but it's not worth bothering with these people, because they did change the name and they avoided it, but they have not taken the bones of the story. So another producer has been working with me to do the Montauk Project and all of its ancillary subjects like a Game of Thrones type of format, because this is a much more profitable way to go than the old, put out a movie and a sequel and another sequel. The movie paradigm doesn't work so well anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we don't need to get lost in all that. But anyway, the Montauk Project is a story about a time travel project that took place in Montauk, New York. Now, it gives a lot of circumstantial evidence and a lot of strange science. The most spectacular aspect of my investigation and research into the Montauk Project and publishing the book was to be contacted by a real time control scientist named Dr. David Anderson, who I've known for over a period of years. I've now known him for almost 20 years, 19 years, and he's very mysterious. He comes and he goes. He doesn't always announce when he's going to be in touch with me. Anyway, he in 2008, he invited me and paid my expenses to come to Romania and attend a camp. At the same time, while I was getting a book translated, which is what we're going to be talking about. I call it the Transylvania series. The first book was called Transylvania Sunrise. It's about a collaboration between the Romanian government and the American government to open up a chamber beneath an ancient stone called the Romanian Sphinx in Romania. It's about 2 hours north of Bucharest, the major city in Romania. So anyway, and I've been to the Sphinx several times. And anyway, beneath this chamber was discovered an amazing chamber. And the book is all about the intrigue to get at it and the politics and the evil groups that are trying to get their paws on it. However, what happens is they open up this chamber and they discover what is called, well, it's got all these devices which will read out holographic projections. Like if you put your hand over a table that's 6 foot high, it will read out a holographic projection of your hand and your DNA. And the closer you put your hand, it'll become more microscopic. There's another table where it will show you different forms of life and holographic projections of those forms of life and the star systems that they are supposed to come from. If you put your hand over both parts of the table simultaneously, it'll show you a hybridization of two different forms of life and where they come from. So this is a virtual Noah's Ark. Within that chamber is what's called the projection hall, which will holographically project the history of the world to you. Whoever's watching it, it will be bioresonant with your own DNA and consciousness. So you will see a different picture than myself, or vice versa. So anyway, and this is what we're going to be going in the direction of tonight, is there are 3 tunnels within that projection hall. And each tunnel has a mysterious destination or endpoint. And there are different sequels to this book. Transylvania Moonrise, which is about a whole different adventure, which goes into alchemy and a particular character who was instrumental in helping this discovery take place. He is a Tibetan Lama, but he also poses as a doctor, a Chinese doctor named Dr. Zen, who is in charge of the paranormal department, or what you might call the X-Files department of Romania's most secret intelligence arm, which is called Department Zero. And he has a very mysterious connection to Department Zero. He's not officially over it, but he's the one who put it all together. And this goes back to the days of communist Romania and communist China when they were allied. And there was a cultural exchange program between the two countries. So this second book, Transylvania Moonrise, is about the recovery of an ancient parchment in the mountains of Tibet. And the author, Radu Sinamar, who writes all these books, is a participant and the receipt point of this parchment, which is translated in Book 4, which goes deeply into the history of Romania. And it's what you might call its very special history that is unknown to the rest of the world and has been kept secret. The third book, Mystery of Egypt, is about an adventure into one of those tunnels. It's called The Mystery of Egypt, the First Tunnel. And in that, they go through a tunnel that is it also has a space-time distortion when you go into the tunnel. So you're going into sort of an alternate space, but it does go into what is said to be an actual tunnel beneath the Giza Plateau, where there is an ancient device that enables one to time travel in their consciousness. It's made of all these beautiful, ornate crystals and devices. And Radu's boss, you might call him, and mentor, Caesar, goes into this tunnel, travels into time, but you can only travel in time in your consciousness not physically in this particular device. And they recover what we could call discs, CDs. They're not CDs, but they're special discs that have a whole record of history that goes back thousands upon thousands of years. Now, whether this history goes back beyond the Earth, I can't answer that. But part of their mission is to recover these discs and to take them back to first Romania and then ship them back to the Pentagon, where they would be evaluated and studied.
Wow. I have a question on the discs.
It's a very good question.
The Sumerian stories talk about the MEs, which are apparently some kind of storing system for programs for computers that the Anunnaki used, and that goes back 450,000 years and on through to modern times. But we don't know what they look like, right, sweetheart? We have no idea what they really look like. We just have determined by their description that they are some kind of computer storage system of information. And once you had the MEs, you could construct cities, and you knew everything about, architecture and all kinds of systems, water systems, social systems, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you think about that, Peter? And then Sasha, I'd like you to comment on that as well.
Well, first, before Sasha pitches in, what does ME stand for? Does it stand for anything?
We don't know. It's just they call it MEs, M-E-M-E, right. Period E or MEs. Yeah, it could, that's me, right? But Sasha, are you there?
Yeah, it's just like some of them are about the size of the computing memory backup devices that we all use, and some of them they wear on their watch. Inanna's was sewn right into her clothes and her tiara and her wand and so forth. And these things also were dedicated computing devices, so only could be activated by certain people. We have a lot of Sumerian stuff, and there's a huge literature of the connection between Turkey and the Caucasus. And it's this, there's the other thing that strikes me, Peter, is this thing about the Sphinx and natural features. What Michael Tellinger has been finding is that some of what we call natural features of landscape are actually the body parts of very huge creatures. He says in the terms of south of Africa, it was when Mount Toba went off 70,000 years ago, and it killed all these really big people and beings, and they left some of their footprints. But they're what's called mud fossils. And so I'm just wondering, Peter, if you think that the Sphinx was human-made or whether it could have been a real thing, a being.
Well, you're very... what he is saying is very close to the truth if it's not dead on accurate. And I say this because it's a very good comment. And in other words, what you find when you go to, and listen, I have not traveled all around the world, but when I have traveled to sacred spots in both Romania and Bulgaria, which are both on the same general geographical area, the ancient Thracians and Proto-Thracians, you find that in these sacred spots, you have a piece of geography, whether it be a mountain or a rock, which will look like a face, an animal, and it's unmistakable. And it's like, is it a coincidence? Well, here's how I will answer that question. When I went on one of my sacred journeys to the Romanian Sphinx, we went from the Sphinx and we went 3 hours north to a place called Mount Omu. Mount Omu was a 3-hour hike. It was a very challenging hike because of the wet weather that day. And you can stay in a cabin up there overnight. It has to all be prearranged. You have a very sparse meal. You're apt to freeze your rear end off at night if you're not properly accommodated. They had like 2 wool blankets, which seemed to do the trick. But if one wool blanket fell off, you'd freeze. Anyway, we were supposed to walk back a certain way, but either because of time or weather considerations, we didn't do it. And we all went back to the Sphinx, which was an easy hike. Downhill was easy hike. When we got to the Sphinx, one of our tour organizers, who was a young man who might have been seeing this for the first time, he showed us a map, and I put it in my fourth book, The Secret Parchment, Radu's fourth book, actually, which I participate in. It's not my book, but in my section of the book, I put this overlay of a map, and he showed us this map. And it was a map of the area, like if you were looking above from the sky. And it showed the outline of the Sphinx itself. So in other words, and it's where the beard of the Sphinx would be, the area had always been known for thousands of years as Berbesh, which is the Romanian word. It was the thorns of Berbesh, the thorns of the beard. So in other words, they were identifying the chin of this outline topography of the Sphinx. They knew it. So in other words, and where the Sphinx sat on this outline was where the third eye would be of the Sphinx, so to speak. So just to give you have a topographical map, and the way the geography is on the topographical map, it outlines the profile of the Sphinx. And then where the so-called pineal gland or the so-called third eye would be where the actual Sphinx rests geographically. So here is the topography of the land kind of smacking you on the cheek or on the face during a sacred journey, saying, hey, look it, I'm self-aware. The Sphinx is real. This whole thing is real. So this coincides with what Michael Tellinger is saying. And so I say, well, if he's saying if it's not exactly true, it's close enough to the truth to be considered very seriously.
He has an evidential base. There's some kind of a change in the radioactivity of some of the elements in these structures that make it, that can lead it to being dated and to differentiate it. These are mud fossils. They're not like other fossils of creatures that died very quickly. And so it'd be worth it for you to talk to Michael. He's seeking funding and help.
Well, I would have to take a look at his work.
Sure.
It's interesting, but certainly it's a very good point you brought up. To get back to the discs we were talking about,
yes,
which is very interesting, that they okay. So the story was they brought them back to the Pentagon or whatever, and of course there's no more information that I have seen on what happened with that. However, I have many threads in my work, and one time I got to thinking of, well, what are they going to do with these discs, and I envisioned in my own mind that they're taking all these young people, like say if you ever happen to be in Washington at the right time of night or something, you might see in the FBI building or the CIA building in Virginia, young people kind of like going in and out in the middle of the night. They're like doing classes, and just like a bunch of young college students, and they're being, trained, programmed, et cetera, to become agents of the government. Anyway, I was wondering if they were grabbing these people and saying, hey, would you please look at this disc? And they give them the technology to view the disc and say, would you do notes on what's in it so we can tell? Of course, this is how I'm thinking in a very archaic way. This is an absurd proposition, because if you have it would take thousands of people to do it, and then everybody would have a compartmentalized knowledge. It's no good. So anyway, in one of I think his name is Alex Studer, and he is in San Francisco, and he's interviewed me a few times, and he told me about this huge computer in Utah beneath what's called Granite Rock. I don't know if you've heard of Granite Rock or this giant computer that the government has built. It's gigantic. It's mammoth. I was told in the 1980s that the big computers of the 1980s could fit into something the size of a black box on an airplane. They actually had that technology back then. So if you could imagine the technology we have today, would be you could just fit all of these you're talking about these Sumerian tablets or these tablets I'm talking about. So I realized that they must be taking this information back and using that computer in Utah, which is tied to all sorts of weird energies and weird. We won't go into that because I'm not really an expert on the computer at Granite Mountain, but it's a huge government facility which is going to be tied to the Latter-day Saints and all of the weird connections between the LDS and the government. And I'm just not even going to go down that rabbit hole today. However, so they're going to take all this information and put it in a big computer rather than to have, some young agent study it all and try and cross-correlate the information. They'll have a computer do that. It also occurred to me while I was going through this meditation, if you will, that there would be something within those discs that was like a Trojan horse that they were putting into the U.S. government's secret computer mountain at Granite Mountain or Granite Rock, because this is the nature of what's going on. They're putting a Trojan horse. So these people think they're getting all this information, and it's not going to be quite what they think it is. This is my personal opinion, and it's probably quite true as I get deeper into this series of books and begin to understand the process that is going on here. So that is one aspect of the third book. And of course, it also mentions in that book holographic technology, because one of the Americans, it's a team of Romanians and Americans that go on this journey to beneath the plateau. And one of the characters is from the Pentagon who has a laptop computer that is holographic. In other words, the keyboard is holographic and it projects out holographically. And he's doing all sorts of calculations on it. He's very helpful during the trip. And he explains to the author, he says, I'm kind of like wired into this computer mentally. He says, it's kind of hard to separate me from it. He also says that there is a much bigger one in the Pentagon, a holographic computer. So the technology that is being utilized makes the old days of Valiant Thor, that mysterious character that was the basis of the book Stranger in the Pentagon, it makes whatever he was doing back in those days seem archaic, no matter how advanced it was compared to our 1950s civilization.
That's really consistent with the stuff that Stuart Swerdlow has talked to us about, the information that he got from people that have studied the kind of records that you're talking about. And also the people that the ambassador from Serpo gave us something called the Yellow Book, which is just like the device you described too. So this is consistent with stuff we've been hearing.
Anyway, and the fourth book, which is The Secret Parchment, 5 Tibetan Initiation Techniques, not only includes the translation of the manuscript, and I should say something about this manuscript. This manuscript, and it does not mention it in the book, unless I mention it, it is what is called, in fact, somebody who was very close to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition recognized that this manuscript that Radu had translated, that he had recovered from the high hills of Tibet, was given to him by a blue goddess named Mashande. This was known as a terma. And a terma is something that was planted by the ancient second Buddha, Padmanabhasava, if I say it right. He planted certain what were called termas and into the ground or wherever he had them placed, and they would be released at certain times in the evolution of humanity to sort of catalyze or speed up the evolution of humanity. And this was recognized by somebody who was very close to the Tibetan tradition, and he recognized it as a terma. And as a result of that, he got me not that I was asking for it, but he got me an audience with the spiritual lama of New York. And I just happened to be there, and he saw me on his birthday where there were 300 people waiting to see him. and give him gifts. And they weren't going to be able to see him because he can't see 300 people in one day. So I was escorted up to see him for 20 minutes. And I told him the story. And I revisited him later. But that was sort of the tradition that this thing was coming on. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm certainly not a Tibetan. But it was like I was in synchronizing with this ancient legend because I was processing this information. Anyway, that fourth book, The Secret Parchment, when this terma is released, it coincides with some ancient or some very topical things that were happening at that time, which was this huge antenna-like structure was discovered in Antarctica because the ice was melting rapidly. And they only described it as antenna because they didn't really know what it was. But it was sending out signals between, I think it was Europa in Jupiter, one of the moons of Jupiter. And it also had a signal going to Mount McKinley and a signal going to Transylvania into the area where I have traveled most years for the last 9 years, area called Sarpsborg, where there are these wooden structures that imitate a sonic signature, and there's all these stone relics, and that is sort of the sacred capital of the ancient Dacian people. It is the holiest spot in Transylvania for the Romanian people and the ancient Romanian people. So because they were sending this signal to that area was there was some secrets that the Romanian Department Zero was holding on to, and the American government was at that time very upset that they weren't being told the secrets. The only reason they weren't told the secrets is because they didn't know very much. I think they had a page or two long report on it. And basically what had happened, and this goes back to 1990s, early 90s, right after communism had fallen. There was a Professor Constantine who was doing archaeological digs in the nearby area. And one day after work, one of the workers, they were putting all the equipment back together, and I guess it was the son of the guy who was doing the contracting work, had stumbled accidentally into this opening. And he went down, and the professor went down, and they went deeper and deeper and deeper, and they found these like relics. It was like sloped down, and eventually they followed this, and they got into these tunnels of golden tunnels. Now, everyone in Romania and not just in Romania, but outside, gold mining companies know that there's a huge amount of gold deposits in this area. This is not disputed. The gold tunnels sound fantastic. And of course, it stands to reason there would be tunnels. And of course, as they were going through the tunnels, they would see more quartz. Quartz is a sign of gold. So these huge gold deposits and tunnels with them. There was not only gold, but there was an ancient civilization that had accessed this area. Now, that is completely consistent with ordinary Romanian history. The extent of it, though, has always been underestimated. And there is one Canadian gold company, which I think operates out of Switzerland, that has tried to get at sections of this gold and tried to cover up areas to get to this underground area. That is a whole scandal that I've covered in my newsletter many years ago. And the Romanians have actually stopped them from, screwing this area up. So anyway.
Wow.
Do you want to ask anything?
Saved it. No, it's just wonderful. You saved it. It's like something good got done.
Oh, it was the biggest protest in the history of Eastern Europe. They had all the people in Romania that were surrounding this big parliamentary building. It's one of the biggest buildings in the world. It's kind of a monstrosity, but they all circled that building because the Romanian people were not going to allow this to happen. And so far, so good. this is a whole entrance to the inner earth, and it's not the only one in Romania. But anyway, so I was talking about this Professor Constantine. Now, when I've gone to Romania, I was once shown that's where Professor Constantine lived, so apparently he's quite a real character. I didn't go in the house and knock, I don't know if there's anybody there anymore. It looked kind of old, as many houses in Romania do. There are also very modern ones. But anyway, what they do is they go down and they find this bed of gold. And the bed of gold it looks like a sort of a bed to lay down on. And I said, this sounds to me like that's for out-of-body viewing, remote viewing. You get on the gold, because gold will, the book does say correctly that gold will facilitate your consciousness. Gold is, it makes your brain work faster if you're around a lot of gold. So anyway, there was a inscription on this that they had to translate. They sent it to 5 universities to translate it, and it came out with Creo Salmos is what they interpret it as. Creo refers to, KR refers to chronos, time. EO is something that refers to the numeral 10, which is, God, or just the 1-0 binary code. But this was basically, they translated it meaning this is the center of time. This is the center of time. Excuse me. I will be right back. I have to mute this.
Okay.
I will just say,
I'll be right back.
That Chronos is the Aryans give to Anu, the king of Nibiru. And by the time you get down to Greek times, Chronos is what Anu has become.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I'm back. Can you hear me?
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Now, okay, so the Creo Salmos, it didn't say so in the book, but my translator picked it up, and so did I. I didn't need the translator. Salmos refers to Zalmoxis. Zalmoxis is the patron god of Romania. If there are hundreds of books on Zalmoxis in Romania, in English, I think there's one, and it was written by a Romanian. And Zalmoxis was a legendary man who was the teacher of Pythagoras, and he transformed from a man into a god. But he only did this after 4 years of initiation underground in caves. Now, he parallels a tradition in Romania. It's one of the most sacred traditions in Romania, and it's not it's not adequately well known or well practiced by the Romanians themselves. And I became a recipient of this experience. They are called the ancient spirits of Transylvania. And I'm talking about Transylvania in particular. They're known as the Solomonari. And the Solomonari is, of course, a word that sounds much like Solomon, the King Solomon. So you have, it's really has to do with the sun and the moon and the balancing of the energies. And yes, they would tell you that Solomon was named after the Solomonari, as was the legendary, or as was the civilization of Samaria, because there is a place in Transylvania called Samaria. And it's small compared to Samaria, but what happened in Transylvania during the Ice Age, everybody had to recede into Transylvania because that was the only place you could survive during the Ice Age. It was protected not only by its mountains, but by its underground caverns, because you can go live underground, you could live above ground, and you could still farm during the Ice Age. So when people began to spread out after the Ice Age, they would take their place names with them, such as Samaria. And so anyway, you have this Zalmoxis character who was initiated by the Solomonari. The Solomonari will appear as beggars or as sheep or shepherds. And what they will do is they will traditionally take you to a cave. Now, You might go to that cave and you might meditate. You might have a transcendental experience, or you might be swept up into their etheric environment and literally initiated, as was the case of Zalmoxes, who reappeared 4 years later as a god, somebody who had transcended from man to God. Now, that was just this golden bed I was telling you about with this inscription on it. So it told them that they were in a very heavy place. When I say heavy, I mean very significant, a very awesome place. Now, they followed golden tunnels further where they got to a room of golden thrones that were huge, like maybe 7 foot high and too big for an ordinary human to sit in. There were hieroglyphic I want to call posters. I can't even think of the right word, on the wall, scrolls or whatever, writings on the wall. And it was all gold.
Frescoes.
Fresco is one word, but that's not the word I was thinking of. In any case, it's like a scroll, but they were embedded into the walls. Anyway, we had, there is this ellipsoid hole. And that's like a pure vortex to another world that they see. And the young man is standing over it. And it goes into where it looks like a whole nother universe. And there's this big planet that's kind of coming to them. And they're just looking and observing it. And somehow this young man falls into this vortex, falls into this other world. He's gone. At which point the professor retreats. What am I going to do? I've lost my contractor's son. He goes back, finds his way out, and of course he reports it to the authorities. The authorities act very peculiar, as we can expect. They come, they isolate him, but before they isolate him, the head of Department Zero, Cesar Brad, who was the author's mentor and senior in Department Zero, is put onto this, and he interviews Professor Constantine and makes a short note. And this is how we know this story at all. It's because Caesar interviewed him. But before Caesar could do anything else, Professor Constantine was the 3 people came from Bucharest, and they interviewed him, they investigated, and they brought this, they investigated, they all got very frightened. And they all basically, I think they ended up in a car accident. They all died. And eventually a guy with a cement mixer was brought in to cover up the area, and he went crazy. I think these guys helped cover it up themselves, I think, the guys that died. And they could never find the location again. So Professor Constantine was taken off to Bucharest, and nobody had ever heard of him since. So that's what happened with him. And the Americans got all upset when they found out that there was something happening in this area, and the Romanians were not telling them. Now, in the 4th book, it says that this information I told you was at that time the highest state secret. And this report that I just gave you, and I don't know if that's all the report, it was presented that way, was kept in a very high secure sort of briefcase, and it would go from one authority to the next. Nobody could keep it all the time. And anyway, now it's out in book form. So that was this big secret. But it was basically a sort of a message to the world. After that book was written, I maintained in Romanian, not in English, I maintained a correspondence with the author, which ceased to exist as of about 7 years ago. In fact, he disappeared from even his Romanian publisher's life, which concerned the Romanian publisher. He has now since reappeared, but when he disappeared, before he disappeared, he said that his boss, Caesar, went to become an ambassador to the inner earth. And this sounded rather strange, to say the least. Okay, so Caesar's gone, and he would sometimes write letters saying that he missed Caesar. But obviously, when Radu started disappearing, he was actually beginning to go into this inner earth himself. And maybe not becoming an ambassador, but becoming a visitor. And this is where this current book goes. And this kind of gets your audience up to date in sort of a ramshackle, fast way. The books are available on Amazon. You look at Radu Cinemar, Peter Moon, and my website, skybooksusa.com, which is my website for books being purchased. You can also go to the Time Travel Education Center for a lot more fun stuff. How are we doing? Yeah. So that's kind of an introduction.
Cool. I love what you're doing. It's totally fascinating to me. I've had some studies of a Norwegian fellow who was also in the inner earth in the late 1800s, a literate person, and also ancient Germans who were escaping in Bolivia in a series of tunnels over the centuries made their way to under Antarctica to a place called Bodland. And so I'm just totally fascinated. All these different stories from different directions are all coming together. You got to, I bet you're going back there and getting in that tunnel again and again. How can you resist it?
Well, I mean, I did as a one of my adventures there. It was 2014. It was 2014. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I had, in 2000, this is very profound, and I think I did tell you this last time, but for the new people, and it's very dramatic how this stuff changes your life. So I go to this sacred area in 2013, and I'm with a group of people that I am like sort of the tour guide for. They're none of them are really Romanian. I kind of had a couple Romanians with me, but these were people that were coming on the tour. And we went to the Sarmasegetuza area, and there I met this beautiful young lady who was to become my wife. And I had no idea. I was not looking for romance there. I was not looking for anything other than my journey. And I happened to meet her on those very grounds. And it was during the famous August biorhythm of, August 10th, 11th, 10th to 14th. So yes. I met her, and she's still with me. We've been married 3.5 years now and are very happy together. But she comes from a very tradition of the inner earth. In fact, I should mention this. I didn't even think about this, but her mother, which is really a stepmother, refers to herself as an ambassador of Agartha. And she appeared in Long Island last year in August. And Dr. David Anderson was kind enough to Skype into the conference that she held for about 100 people in Garden City, Long Island. And she's going to be returning in September. It's probably the week.
What's her name?
Her name is Tamarinda Massan.
Oh, okay.
Tamarinda, Tamarinda, Massan, Massen. And she is a spiritual teacher. She has her own spiritual school. Most of her clients in the past have been European. She's fluent in German. One of her teachers in school was a very famous man, Hermann Obert. Hermann Obert was the quintessential rocket scientist who taught Wernher von Braun. And so he was brought over with paperclip, although he was from the German section of Transylvania in Sibiu. And that's where she grew up. She also grew up partly in Germany. So Tamarinda has a very, very unique history. In fact, I one time saw a picture of her father. It was unmistakably her father because the chin was so similar, but he was dark and he was Hindu looking. And she looks white and, like an Aryan with the blonde white hair and all that. But anyway, so my wife was a student of hers and still is to some degree, except that she lives in America and is learning all about America here. So anyway, that was an experience for me going there on that particular journey. And then that was in 2013. in 2014, I went back and with a couple of friends of mine, and we went, and my wife's name is Paula. Paula was with us and we were taken by an archaeologist. He's one of the most, I don't know if he's the only, I can't say he's the only one, but he's a very well-known archaeologist in Transylvania. And he had met me the previous spring, and when I went back in the summer, he wanted to take me to a cave. Now this is when I told you about these people these beings called the Solomonari. They will take you to a cave. This man was acting in the role of a Solomonari, although he didn't necessarily know it. He was just an archaeologist. Took us to the cave. He told us all these stories about the Titans, which to me weren't all that interesting. It's Choklavina Cave. And so he takes me to the cave, and it's a magnificent cave. It's big. You can go in. You only go into a certain distance, but it's full of 7 kilometers worth of caves where it mixes with other caves. And this cave was actually, the road to it was built by the dictator Ceausescu years earlier because it was a valuable source of bat guano. It's a bat cave. And the bat guano was very useful for explosives. Nowadays, they've closed off simple access to the cave because the bat guano is very valuable for growers, particularly marijuana growers. And people will pay highly to get at this bat guano for its fertilization powers. And as they say, it also has powers for munitions. But
hold that thought. We'll be back in 5 minutes. It's time for a commercial break. See you in 5. Aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
You need some more than speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable CNN network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com. At Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Hyla Cass, MD, Melanie Bridgeton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous.
It is. Very dangerous.
Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
In breaking news, a visiting Syrian diplomat reported today that their population is evolving rapidly and advancing into a 5th dimensional consciousness. They are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances. Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge, Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A, for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitors' peaceful contact and the ongoing project of cleansing the Earth.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution.radio. And I am your host, Janet Kerr Lessin, with Dr. Sasha, Alex Lessin, our producer, Thomas Becker, and our special guest, Peter Moon. And we're talking about a new book coming up in October called Inside the Earth, the Second Tunnel. And I've listed his bio and all the postings of all the books that Peter wrote, and he's doing this with, what's his name, Radu Cinamar. Yes. So before we get back to our show, I just want to remind everybody to please go over to the donation button on Revolution.radio site and make a donation. We appreciate whatever you donate, $1, $10, $15, $20, whatever is wonderful, and we're very gracious and gratitude to you for doing such a donation. And the Mad Painter, where are we in our goals?
We got 2039 and we need 2600. That's almost a $200 for the next several days in order to make the month. So please donate.
Yeah, please. It doesn't seem like that's much better than the other day when we were on. So please.
We just barely make it each month. I can't understand it.
It's very strange, indeed. All right, so Sasha, what would you like to say before we bring Peter back on? Peter has a lot to cover in the next hour.
Okay, well, this is what so many of you have been waiting for. What's going on inside the Earth? What's that all about? Let's hear it, Peter.
Okay, so I'm trying to think where we left off when the interruption happened, the necessary interruption, and the welcome interruption.
I forget as well.
Okay, all right. So I was talking about the Zalmoxes, the god Zalmoxes, and this golden hieroglyphics, yes. and this character that was lost, and Professor Constantine had disappeared, and this was like this big secret, and it was released in this book. So I was then beginning to bridge into the new book, which was saying that this character Caesar had become this ambassador to the inner Earth, and I thought that was rather mysterious, if not strange. I was told this, and then Radu disappears in 2011. And he's not talking anymore to me. And I would sometimes visit his publisher in Bucharest, and he was very concerned that he had not heard from Radu. Then last year,
oh my goodness,
I had received a email from him telling me that Radu had reappeared, and he had a new book. And the new book was published in Romania last year. Now, I began trying to make arrangements to translate this book. It was very difficult. And I'm not going to go into all the difficulties I had. It took me, actually, just a few months ago, I actually got the contract signed with him to do the book, which was more of a formality than a necessity. However, I couldn't communicate with this character, my publisher. And he's not always that easy to communicate with, but this was ridiculous. And then once I kept waiting to hear from him, so I kept hesitating to hire the translator. So finally, my wife started the translation, but she didn't have a lot of time to do it. And then I tried hiring translators, and I couldn't hire any. Nobody could do it for one reason or another. I know a lot of people. But my old translator, former one, was having a baby. So she had the best excuse of all. She'd love to do it, but she's having a baby any day now, any week now. So basically, I got this friend of mine, my first friend from Transylvania. She was a young lady when I met her. She translated the book. She's not a professional translator, and it has been very awkward. It is like pulling teeth. Anyway, I've gotten 3 chapters translated. They're long chapters. They are available on my website to paid subscribers, timetraveleducationcenter.com. They can look at them. I just released chapter 3 today. However, I will begin to go into what the book, I'm just saying there was a tremendous amount of difficulty, because what this is essentially is a communication from the people of the inner Earth. And the reason I'm telling you is not to tell you about all my personal difficulties in doing something. It's to make you understand that what could have been a very normal transaction in the business world was hobbled by many intangible things that made it, just next to impossible to do. And it's still not done. However, there is a reason. There is a big chasm in consciousness between the inner Earth and the outer Earth. And much of this has to do with the materialistic viewpoint that so many of our scientists and even religious people have had in this world. Just this materialism. So basically, what we learn from this new book has to do with the inner Earth itself and how the inner Earth was formed. And of course, the inner Earth formed into the outer Earth. And I'm going to go a little bit into black holes. Now, black holes, and after reading this book, or the chapter, just the first 2 chapters, I watched shows on the black holes on the Science Channel, and I'm thinking, God, these people don't know what they're talking about. That's my response after reading this book. They know some of what they're talking about, but they don't know all of what they're talking about. So anyway, about how black holes forms. And this book just goes right into it. But before I go into that, I'm going to mention something about the history of black holes. Black holes were actually discovered by, and this is recognized by regular science, by a man, if I can pronounce his name right, an Indian astrophysicist named Subramanian Chandrasekhar. Chandrasekhar. And I first learned of him from Douglas Dietrich, who knew well about him and told the correct story about him. Although he was awarded the Nobel Prize late in his life, he was originally derided and despised upon presenting his mathematical formulas demonstrating the existence of black holes. And this prejudice was put upon him by Sir Arthur Eddington of Cambridge University. And he referred to Chandrasekhar as a yellow nigger. This was the amount of hubris and prejudice in terms of science. The Nazis, in turn, recognized his genius. They might not have liked his skin color, but they recognized his genius. And I don't mean to imply that he was a Nazi, but they took his information and they put it into a supercomputer that was developed by a man named Konrad Zuse, Z-U-S-E. And people think of John von Neumann as inventing the world's first modern computer, and he did as far as America is concerned, but Zuse submitted 2 patents in 1937 prior to the so-called first computer. And of course, what the Nazis invested heavily in this supercomputer and put in Chandrasekhar's information and cross-correlating the data, came up with the ideas of the black holes and that the galaxy and the universe itself all have a black hole at their core. And this is the concept which the Germans used to refer to as the Black Sun, which is the title of one of my books, The Black Sun, Montauk's Nazi-Tibetan Connection. So black holes, in other words, are recognized as phenomena which do not conform to space-time. They are known as a singularity, and a singularity mathematically is basically something that means we don't know what the hell it is. That's basically what it means. Black holes are called an event horizon, signifying they are the end of the viewable landscape or spacescape. So in general relativity, black holes are identified as a tangible link to the infinite. And the only reason they're tangible is because they can be observed. But they're largely a mystery. So this book goes into demystifying the mystery. I mentioned Dr. Zen, the Tibetan Lama, also known as Ripasundi, and he says that there are two primary impediments which confound scientists. This won't be surprising to you. First is that they do not have adequate instrumentation by which to measure all the phenomena emanating from or concerning black holes. And this lack of adequate instrumentation applies to a host of other phenomena as well, not just that associated with black holes. Second, scientists are not even generally aware of the phenomena that is outside the bounds of their own instrumentation. Consequently, they do not think about measuring it or making equipment to measure it. Now, all of this has to do with what we would know is subtle energy. And this subtle energy ties into what is known as the etheric plane. Now, when it comes to the creation of the planet, this is what Dr. Zen says. He's speaking to Radu in the book, and this is a direct quote, and I'm going to read the quote. Water, created by the dynamic of black holes, does exist in cosmic space. Better said, the process to create water begins with a condensation of subtle water from the etheric plane through the dynamic rotation of a black hole. I'm saying a mouthful here. In the material plane,
I understand.
This condensation appears like an expulsion from the black hole's vortex, and right next to it, water is manifested in the shape of ice. So water exists in cosmic space and in huge amounts. Even astrophysicists have noticed it, having a big surprise when they do. You cannot, however, expect for it to be like potable water because it has some special properties. It is, however, water. You will find the same process inside the Earth. The water is condensed beyond the dynamic of the black hole that emanates from the center of the planet. It's amazing. I know this is contrary to typical scientific notions and dogma, and while everything seems to be so phantasmagorical, it is obvious and simple enough if you make an effort to overcome the initial shock. Then, you should no longer be surprised over the prospect of a black hole residing in the center of the Earth. Any structure, no matter how big or small, is based upon the same fundamental principle. There is a black hole vortex in the center, and this is a principle of creation, just as is the principle of absorption, which applies at the end of its existence. Any galaxy has at its center a black hole. Any atom has in its nucleus a tiny black hole that ensures its existence and manifestation of evolution. Don't guide yourself under the contemporary scientific paradigm. The way it sees the world is still at a relatively modest level, which is focused on either the quantifiable universe or the microcosmic aspect because it is limited to a purely materialistic understanding of things. End of quote.
Wow. That must mean there's a singularity inside each person as an organized system.
Well, that would make sense, yes, because
that's what Nassim Haramein calculates in his equations. He said that everything from the largest to the smallest has a singularity, and you can mathematically chart it, and it's all in one line, and that is why we are all one. It's provable mathematically. We're all one.
The process of the eyes, and what when you take stuff into the eyes physically, that imitates a black hole.
Mm-hmm. And that's why in concert, when you look into the right eye, let me just finish this statement. When you look into someone's left eye, you see all the way to source. When you're like in a puja and you're looking and you keep looking into the left eyes and look into the left eye of your lover. And that's why some people, when you do the sacred pujas and you're looking into left eyes, they start to just cry because they're seeing source, they're seeing God, they're seeing oneness, they're really experiencing it and seeing it and becoming it.
Yeah, you know what? That's so right. Carolyn Corey says that all the singularities are in simultaneous connection, and that's the Akashic records that's inside every black hole or singularity. I don't know if that's where you're going with it, Peter, but it's very exciting to me.
I'm not, but sure, certainly it's a whole. Well, let me go where I am going with it, because
go ahead.
see, this is what happens. And basically, when you're penetrating the inner Earth, and he goes to talk about Admiral Byrd and all this phenomena, is that there are certain magnetic null zones. And I'm going to be going back to Romania this summer, and I'm going to be looking for these magnetic null zones with a compass. I'm bringing just an ordinary compass because there's certain areas there where the compass will go wild. It won't work. This is a magnetic null zone. But when it discusses sort of like the poles are very ripe for these zones, but they're not the only place they exist. And so when you hit a magnetic null zone, like Admiral Byrd did in his adventures to both the North Pole and the South, well, particularly the North Pole. I don't know if it happened in the South Pole. But anyway, you go into what is essentially a different plane of existence. And it's a different consciousness, but you only go if your consciousness is attuned to it. It's a higher frequency. It's a higher vibration. So you go, you experience, and you come back. So this tells us that if Admiral Byrd was indeed seeing mastodons and whatnot, it wasn't in this plane of existence. It was in an etheric plane. And most people, when they go into these regions, it's not going to happen. They're just going to go, and they're not going to notice anything. A more sensitive individual might notice something. He might have a full-blown experience. He might not. Depends on the situation and circumstances. So there are different planes of existence and different regions of consciousness. And he goes into the geography. I don't know if that's the correct word, geography, but the constituents of the Earth itself. And this whole idea that there's nothing but molten lava inside the Earth, he picks apart scientifically because it's all based on a lot of assumptions and misapplying the scientific measuring. The Cavendish experiment is what scientists based their whole idea of molten lava, and all of these arguments are refuted, and quite convincingly so. So you have this sort of superstition of the Earth being nothing but molten lava. What actually happened, what's in the center is a black hole, but approaching that black hole is a whole series of layers of consciousness. It's more like a labyrinth, but it's not a labyrinth that's physical. It's more mental or causal in nature. So basically, you have him going into right now where I'm at in the book, he's visiting an inner city that's probably a few hundred kilometers beneath Romania, and it's in a cavity of what would appear to be like molten lava, but it's its own cavity within its own rock, and there's a whole civilization that has evolved down there with cities, and it's just life is made do with what resources it has down there. It's similar but different from the Earth, and that's just sort of a warm-up act because the other places he travels to are much more exotic. So the way this book is written, it's basically telling you also that the inner Earth has protected itself for centuries from the people on the outside. And in particular, in this region, he goes into the wars between the Dacians and the Romans. The Romans invaded Transylvania for its gold, and it's an area that they could not subdue. And the Dacians, the secret to defeating their enemies was to give them gold, because they would destroy them. So the Romans took, hundreds of tons of gold out of this area, and they didn't scratch the surface. And of course, their empire fell apart. This was around 100 AD. And of course, with the before that time, there was a lot of people that knew about these underground connections, and then the inner Earth people began to close them up. So the people that knew about them were few and far between. And they began to close off the inner Earth because of the advent of the Roman Empire and what followed the Roman Empire was the Roman Church. However, so this is sort of the paradigm, and this book is explaining, it's initiating you into the consciousness of the inner earth to say, hey, we're people down there, and we can communicate to you. Now, I just remembered where I left off when we were about to
okay.
I was talking about this archaeologist who had brought me to this cave, okay?
Oh, right.
Choclavina Cave. And this is very important because here it is. I went to the cave, and it was a great experience. Okay, we went to the cave. Okay, wow. Why did we go to the cave? I didn't ask to go to the cave. I didn't even know about the cave. This archaeologist who I had met a few months before, I had a long talk with him. Okay, he came back and he took us to the cave, and he didn't want to take any money or anything. We offered him money, but no, he didn't want to take any money. He just says, no, I just want to show you the cave. And he showed us the cave. And he had no idea of what he was showing us, because let's go back to June of June of 2000, I guess it was 15. And I did a podcast with Dr. David Anderson. It was the last podcast or last public interview he did, save for the one he did, which was to a closed audience last August. He basically was talking. I had asked him, I said, is there anything you can tell me about Romania, with your research? Because after all, he's the one who brought me to Romania. He says, well, I can tell you something, but it's not for public consumption. He says there is a cave called Choclavina Cave. He pronounced it Sioclavina. He pronounced, although his Romanian is impeccable, he pronounced it incorrectly. He says Sioclavina Cave, and he says this is where the biggest, in the history of the Earth, according to our research, this is the biggest evidence of a time reactor discharge. A time reactor discharge. Of course, he has a time reactor, which is, you can read about on my website, timetraveleducationcenter.com, that can actually propel people into the past or future. And he said there was a time reactor discharge. It's all done through a time reactor. And he said there's evidence of a major time reactor that occurred in this place, Choclavina Cave. And I said, well, David, it's interesting, but I was there last summer. He goes, you were? So anyway, when it came to the actual interview, this was all preparation for a podcast. He talked about it. He didn't hold it back. He let it be publicly heard. And he was just very, very amazed that I was actually in all places in this cave. So, wow. He was surprised. I was surprised. And I went back to that cave that summer. And when I went back to the cave, I had one of the same persons with me, one of the same people that had been with me before. And we went back and went to meditate in the cave. We found some other entrances to the cave, but they were blocked. And you could, and I guess I went and I kind of meditated, and I tried to connect with this inner consciousness of the earth, this inner being. And of course, the rest of the crowd wanted to move on and explore these other entrances. And, so I went on and I, departed, went back there again. Did I go back there? No, I only went back there one time. That was that time. So, it was like I was trying to communicate with these creatures from the inner earth, and only through reading this book did I say that maybe I was really onto something. Now, that cave is, as they say, it's an amazing place. But the significance here is that Dr. Anderson had recognized it completely independent. We both arrived at it from different positions. And he said in his lecture to us last August that he says there is more information to release on Choclavina Cave, but I can't do it publicly at this time. He also said he was under several non-disclosure agreements, which sort of impede him. Now, one of the things that Radu states in the beginning of this book, he states that one of the interesting Well, first off, he states that all these websites that talk about him or say that they're from him or whatever are not him. He does not have an internet presence. The only thing he would endorse was the books that I have translated. He complimented me on the job that I had done, and he said the most intriguing thing about my work is Dr. David Anderson, who he says he does not know. But he later goes on to say, without referring to Dr. Anderson, he says that you cannot penetrate the inner earth if your consciousness is not attuned. Therefore, if you have a device, a technological device, whether it be a time reactor or any other device, if your mind is not attuned, you cannot access it. So he told me that he is writing this book in part for Dr. David Anderson. So David Anderson could possibly access some very interesting areas if he were to maybe find out some of the information in this book, which will be shared with him.
Peter, it's obvious that you have been selected to be some kind of a go-between with this information. It's not chance; it's way beyond chance. You have been guided. That's what it's obvious to me.
Well, yes, it's my own event horizon. Because when we all go to sleep at night, or when we graduated from school, or whatever the hell our life was, we had our own event horizon. We say, okay, I'm gonna go do this in life, and I'm gonna be this in life. And some people get pretty thwarted in their adventure, and fortunately for me, and fortune and destiny play a big role. They're not the only role. You have good luck, you have fortitude, you have persistence, you have intelligence, but all of those things are not good enough. You have to have some destiny working in your fate, and certainly that's been a factor. So yes, the like when we did the Montauk Project, it's wow, what an incredible story that ties so many things together. And of course, the Nazis are lurking there in Montauk, which are an intrigue. What the hell are they doing here? And I've rolled all these things back, and doing that attracted Dr. David Anderson into my life, who's a real time scientist and broke down time travel science into such simplistic iterations that I was even able to break down into further simplicity on the Time Travel Education Center website. So this kind of reduces the argument of whether it can happen or not. It's the question of is getting access to it. But even if you have access to his technology, what Radu is telling us, it's not good enough, because you aren't going to be entering these realms. And when you enter these realms and you start to read about the people, you're starting to identify with your ancient ancestors. And this is like, oh, wow, there are some good family members way back there that knew something, that didn't forget. Because if you go back to your typical ancestors, they knew less than we did. Not necessarily, and not necessarily in certain aspects, but typically speaking, yeah, they didn't know about this, that, and the other thing. So, yes, this is like an initiation to learning of the core of where we came from and what is it. All the attention on the History Channel and this stuff is to look outward into outer space, and all these aliens that are abducting you or doing God knows what and playing games with you. And you watch the Science Channel and they can't discover anything out there, at least that they'll talk about. It's all just empty space, and they're showing you how the universe works, or how they think it works. And they're, of course, partially right. And then nobody's looking inward. And when you do look at the information that does talk about the inner earth, there's something lacking in it. It doesn't mean that the experiences and some of the iterations are not true, but this kind of gives a scientific reference frame, which is so important to people like ourselves. Especially you being a professor. So it's like, yes, it's very important. So we're like, wow, this is how it all operates. And the more you look at how things operate, it's like, how did we become so cut off from core knowledge? We're kind of like strung out, like Gumby men or something, kind of like, strung out over the earth, looking down and not knowing where the hell we are in some respect.
No, it's deliberate that we are being programmed to not have this information by those who wish to control us.
That may be what's behind that you can't enter the kingdom of God unless you have childhood innocence. So what we find, a lot of people, unless they've done their inner work and they're not like addicted to drugs and stuff like that, they can't get to these different levels that people do that are clear channels and clear vessels who've done their work, who cleared their energy centers, their chakras, etc. And this is so fascinating to me because I would go out of body. I thought out of body, but I could have been physically going to the inner earth. All my childhood, I would be going down to the inner earth. I blocked a lot of things, but as an adult, I was taken to the to an underground facility, which part of it was artificial and part of it was natural. And that's why I asked about the dragon. Have you ever heard of anybody meeting the dragon? Because I did.
Well, you met a dragon, but I can tell you, and I will, my viewpoint on dragons is not consistent with the typical stuff you hear on dragons. And I will tell you, by the way, that the word dragon in Romanian means friend or good. It's beneficial. Now, that's not necessarily their word for dragon. I mean, their word for dragon is not dragon. I think it's Draco, but the word dragon in Romanian is friend.
Well, this is friendly.
So anyway, this is a neat coincidence. It was last time I was in Romania 2 years ago, August 12th. When I got to the hotel that I stay in there, in the Cotizo, I was, checking into my room, and I saw this guy across the hallway checking into his room. Or I go, Andre, what are you doing here? Andre was somebody I knew from Atlanticon. This is way in, and he was the singer. He was like a singer, and I was friends with him, and he was a very good singer. And I said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm on vacation with my girlfriend. And now he was a doctor. He was a medical doctor. And I didn't even know he'd been studying to be a doctor. Now he was a medical doctor. I knew him as a musician. And, we had dinner together and we talked, and it was really coincidence because the psychiatrist who comes with us and brought his family, he brought his daughter. The psychiatrist is a good friend of mine, and he studies Qigong under me. And he said he brought his daughter, and his daughter had been operated on by Andre, the doctor. It was like this major coincidence. So they're out there playing ping pong with his patient, this little girl. She's a beautiful little girl, and he kind of saved her by doing this operation on her leg. So it was like this incredible coincidence that we're all there together. And Andre says, and I didn't, when we went to the Choclavina Cave the second time, I had thought of spending the night there. And my mother-in-law had warned me. She says, if you do, she says, nature will test you very severely. And I nixed the idea of spending the night there. The psychiatrist would have done it with me, not with his family, but with me and him. But the problem was, I said, I don't want to be responsible for taking other people up there. And God knows what's going to happen up there. So what happened when I went up there, two of my friends got separated from me and another lady I was with, and they actually had some dimensional experiences where the GPS suddenly had them being located in Kosovo, in Yugoslavia, and because one of the guy's brothers was saying, well, now all of a sudden you're in Kosovo, and they were having a time slip experiment. We thought they were lost, and the rains had come down heavily on us, and I was under a big thick tree, but I was getting soaked. I thought I was going to be all wet and having to go back to the cave at night. And I was tested severely without even having to spend the night there. So anyway, the next day, the lady and the two guys went on this crazy hike, which I'm not even going to talk about. It was insane. They had the time of their lives, but they could have easily, become very discombobulated on that. I knew better than to go on that hike. I stayed at home. I stayed in the hotel. I dried off, and Andre says, we're going to go to the dinosaur museum. Here's where I'm talking about the dragon. the dinosaur museum. I said, there's a dinosaur museum? Yes, in the city of Hatteg. Now, Hatteg is a tiny little place. I've been there before. It's tiny. I said, a dinosaur museum? Okay, so I think I'm going to, so we go to the dinosaur museum, and the psychiatrist and his family come with us, and it's like, okay, so I think I'm going to see something like you see in the Natural History Museum in New York City or something, with all these dinosaur bones. You go in there, and it's a modest little building. The people that work there are volunteers, and you come in and you see it's basically this creature, and you find out that the whole impetus of dinosaurs originated right here. This is the whole impetus of dinosaurs, and that they originated from this type of creature. And you see a replica of the creature that's been reconstructed, and that Jules Verne came here. He married a lady from Transylvania, and he came here to study this stuff. And that his book, The Castle in Carpathians, is supposedly based upon this castle or fortress in the city of Deva, which is not far from Hatteg. So you have the dragon, actually, the dinosaur, the dragon originating in this area geographically, according to history and legend of the area. And it wasn't, now, from this area you have Western culture and Eastern culture. The Eastern culture goes from this area of the planet and settles China, okay? And this carries the culture of the dragon with them. The area that goes west carries the culture of the dragon with them. It goes into Great Britain. Although the dragon has a negative connotation in the west, not in the east. And the Lao Tse was Bulgarian by tradition and by legend. And when one of this Bulgarian people traveled to China and they found out he was from Bulgaria, they treated him with great respect because they knew that Lao Tse had come from Bulgaria. And so there are a lot of mysterious traditions that originate from this part of the planet. South of Hatteg, probably an hour or two, is the city of Sibiu, a very beautiful, quaint city. And it's where the German section is. This is in Transylvania. And they have a museum there that actually has rockets that existed in the 1600s or thereabouts. Actual rocket. We're not talking about a modest rocket, but actual rockets. And this is where this Hermann Oberth lived and studied. So he knew about rockets better than anyone. And of course, there is much more information on the rockets that has been held back from the general public that goes back hundreds of years. So that's sort of an adjunct to what I know about dragons, or a little bit about dragons. I've also studied dragons from the aspect of Taoist Qigong, which is called something called the dragon body, where you're uniting all of your fascia to act as one, much like an animal will act with all of its, it's all of its muscles, fascia, and it's all acting as one. So if you ever see a lion paw something, it's much quicker and faster than, say, some badass boxer or something who's going to strike. Animal strikes with complete synchronization of it, primal reaction. That's what I have to say about dragon.
Great, thank you. Matt, do you have any questions for Peter? Are you there, Thomas?
I'm here. It takes me a minute. Are you planning on doing any conferences anytime soon or anything?
Yeah, there's a conference in May 23rd, Agartha. I think the last one they called the Agartha World Symposium, and I don't even know the website for this one, but there's going to be a conference in Garden City, Long Island in September with my Romanian relatives and Tamarinda Masan and Teo Masan, my brother-in-law. He's very interesting. Teo talked last time about a monastery that he's going to be going to. Nobody knows where it is. It's connected to close by 3 countries, which I assume are Mongolia, Russia and China, and it is a very legendary place. I've met somebody who's been there. He's Romanian, and it's got these golden tablets, golden books, and each book represents a certain area of geography on the planet. And it's like a lamasery. He gave the most incredible lecture about it. But in any case, yeah, I will be at that in Garden City, Long Island, and it'll be, I think, a 2-day event. And it'll be a lot of instruction, because Tamarinda calls herself an Agartha. It's not going to, I mean, I'll be there and I'll talk, but it's not going to feature my work as much as it's going to feature her work and her instruction, and on inner earth stuff. So she calls herself an ambassador of Agartha, and she does not come on the same train, so to speak, as Radu. They're coming from different quarters, although they're complementary of each other. And she was still is actually, retired, general in the Romanian army. And of course, one of her asked her what she did, and her job was to evaluate aeronautical equipment. So they'd hand her a piece of equipment, and she'd say yay or nay, or say something about it. In the Eastern Bloc countries, Russia in particular and Romania, they do not have a prejudice against the intuitive arts like we do in America, did in America. And David Anderson noticed this when he purchased the assets to the Moscow Aviation Institute. And so he basically would go in and watch the scientists, and right next to them would be the intuitives working in conjunction with them. So it's a different approach. And she's got she has a very mysterious life. And I asked her, and David enjoyed her very much. He said, I think somebody asked David, or I think he asked when last August, he says, when can we do this again? So we talked about having an event in Prague. I wanted to have one in Prague. Talked about having one in Romania. I don't know. Maybe we'll do an event. But right now, the only event scheduled is in September the 23rd. I think it's the 24th, Saturday and Sunday, Garden City, Long Island, Tamarinda Masson, MAASSEN. I will post the event on my website when I have the information. If I can find it right now while we're talking.
Yeah, you can give us a link. I have a couple questions for you, Peter, related to that. I interviewed a Billy Faye Woodard one time, and so I think he was talking about Tamarinda, and it was in a positive light. I think they were in agreement with each other. Are you familiar with Billy Faye Woodard, who said he is from the inner earth?
No.
Okay, you might want to
don't know him. I just don't know him, and so I can't say anything.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, you can ask Tamarinda. Because I was trying to reach Tamarinda at one time when I had Billy. I wanted to, do a whole series. So maybe you can help us connect with her.
If you find me on Facebook, I will connect you with Teo. Teo speaks very good English. He's my brother-in-law. Tamarinda can understand English. She's getting better all the time. Her speaking English is a little weak. It's improving all the time, but you talk to Teo and he can tell you, and he will help organize all this stuff. If you want to do something with her, you talk to him.
Yeah. And then we are, Dr. Lessin and I are putting on a conference in October 25th through 28th in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it's called Stargate to the Cosmos. And I definitely would like to talk to you. Maybe we'll get together a PowerPoint or something on your work. You have the Inside the Earth, the First and Second Tunnel series. Maybe you would like to come, but if you can't, that's fine. But I sent you an application. If you feel so moved, feel free to respond. Or there might be something else you want to I mean, you've got everything. You've got time travel. You have the Montauk. You could do 5 workshops or presentations.
Well, yeah,
you're so knowledgeable.
Yeah, my work is quite different and quite interesting, and it will become a lot more prevalent as the resistance in the media is kind of falling apart, because we're under the spell of Pluto, and Pluto is a planet which is relentless, and it has its dark side, but it also has its positive side. So a lot of dark forces are on guard and starting to fall away, and as it applies to the media, the media, everybody's gotten tired of the media, and now the media has become this completely bonkers, institution. It was always bonkers, but I mean, it's just completely, I guess what you might say, flapping its wings in all sorts of different directions.
Oh,
right.
It's when I think about you, I realize that what you've been moved to do, like with Qigong, and being on the path that you've been on, is like aligning yourself with some kind of deep pattern mission. It's just like, and so this is really interesting, and it seems like people that have deliberately gone meditative, whatever their path, but particularly if it's got a somatic dimension, wind up being able to access what everyday people can't access because it's not within the range of what they're open to.
Totally, and this is why it's like, it's kind of funny in my case, because I always wanted to be a writer, but I never associated popularity or fame. That was not my goal. I never thought about the fact that if you want to be successful as a writer, you have to have fame or popularity. I didn't equate the two, So basically, I would rather be like Dr. Anderson or Radu, where I'm like invisible, where I don't have a public front or face, yet however I seem to be suited for the task. So it's all okay, but yes, I would much rather be behind the scenes, and for a great deal of my career I have been behind the scenes, but lately, no, I have to be more forward and abundant in terms of public perception. And as they say, if these media projects do happen, and there's every indication that they will, yes, it will become, Montauk Project is becoming a household word now, where friends of mine from 25 years ago are saying, yeah, the neighbors are talking about it now, and I think it's so stupid, this is so old. I say, well, yeah, they're just finding out about it. That's how long the lag is. So it's all going to be interesting, and we only have a few minutes left, I guess. But what have you two been up to lately?
Oh, we're heading out to Contact in the Desert on Wednesday, and we're going to present 3 different things. One is on experiencers, it's a workshop, and experiencers are those people that have out-of-the-box contact with paranormal and extraterrestrial beings. And we're going to do a presentation on the Anunnaki, which has been our specialty for many years. We've written 4 books on the Anunnaki, and we're on a panel about experiencers with Whitley Strieber, and all these are on Sunday at Contact in the Desert, which is going to have like 3, 4, or 5,000 people. I'm not sure what they expect this year. They moved to a new venue, which I think will be less harsh. They were out in the desert before, and so now it's going to be like a nice air-conditioned hotel. So we're looking forward to it. And then we decided to put on this conference in 2018, and it's quite successful. Lots of people responding. But when you came on today, I go, oh, Peter has a piece of this puzzle.
Yes, well,
and I'd love to talk to you about that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We have something else. The 3 of us have something else to discuss. Not tonight, but I'll bring it up to feed it, because a lot of this old I mean, I understand the experiencer and all this stuff, and it was much more prevalent, 20, 30 years ago as a phenomenon. It still happens, of course. But in the back of my bullpen, I have this subject I'm always working with. And this is the Babylon working of Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. And I will be writing an occult biography of L. Ron Hubbard. I'm already working on a book called, which is on my website to paid subscribers. It's about 13 chapters. The L. Ron Hubbard, The Tao of Insanity, which goes into a lot of hidden aspects about him that aren't seen or recognized. It's not a discomplimentary book. It's neutral, but it's talking about aspects of him. This is a precursor to his occult biography, which will go into some of the themes that you're already somewhat familiar with, but it will take it to a new level, and it'll take the Babylon working, which is, of course, the whole idea of the Babylon working is the incarnation of the goddess Babylon and what it represents, and what it represents in terms of the ability to conduct a virgin birth, which would be induced through the moonflower, which you are both very familiar with. And these are subjects that will raise humanity and enlighten humanity, because all of the stuff around the Babylon working and the Aleister Crowley stuff has got this dark gargoylean, like a gargoyle energy around it.
Right.
So much of the abduction experience stuff is just completely enveloped in darkness and ignorance. So because you both have some inner knowledge of what I'm talking about, it's like this is shining certain things in the sun, because we cannot possibly go into a transformation or transmutation into a tantric culture as our culture exists right now. It will back up on it. It would become a sewage cesspool. And so these are subjects that as life changes, we can address these in the future.
Well, we will talk. Stay on after we log off here, and we'll talk about that, and we'll have you back. Thank you, listeners. Much love and blessings, and aloha.
Aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at buyer risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
Your body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. we are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting the danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed. People working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined by the banks. Open your eyes to banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said.
Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.